Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're talking about ISO and why obsessing over keeping your ISO at 100 might actually be holding your photography back. I see it all the time where photographers sacrifice shutter speed, aperture, and their stability to stick to a safe ISO 100. But higher ISO can actually save your shot in many situations. By the end of this video, you'll understand how to use ISO like a tool and not just a limitation. Some of these images that I've captured at really high ISOs have won awards. So with that, let's get started. If you are new to this channel, my name is Shannon and I am a full-time photographer in beautiful British Columbia. Whether you're here to learn, be inspired, or simply enjoy some stunning visuals, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. So let's start with what ISO actually does. In photography, we have three controls that determine exposure, and that's shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Shutter speed controls how long the light hits your sensor. Aperture controls how much light passes through the lens, and ISO is different. ISO controls how sensitive the camera sensor is to the light that's already there. The simple way to think about this is like a volume knob. The light hitting the sensor is the signal, and the ISO turns that signal up so that the camera can create a brighter image. If the sensor receives plenty of light, the signal is strong and the image looks clean. But if the sensor receives very little light, the signal is weak. When that signal gets amplified, noise becomes more visible. Now it's important to remember that noise is caused from lack of light, not your high ISO. When you're photographing a scene where nothing is moving and you're on a tripod, low ISO is fantastic. Think about a classic landscape scenario like waterfalls, mountain scene, or a cityscape. A slow shutter speed allows light into the camera, and because nothing is moving, you can keep the ISO very low and produce extremely clean images. But of course, movement changes everything. Now imagine you're photographing a waterfall. A long exposure works beautiful for flowing water, but what happens if there's ferns in the foreground or trees up against the sides? And the wind from that waterfall, or maybe it's a windy day, is causing those leaves to move. Well, you're going to have a blurry mess because of this long shutter speed. Now, one of the ways that I photograph waterfalls is one, to capture the waterfall nice and slow on a tripod, and then I speed things up to capture the trees, branches, the ferns, flowers, whatever's in the foreground and background to keep them nice and sharp. And I will stack those images in post-processing. When does high ISO become very useful? Raising your ISO allows you to increase your shutter speed and stop down your aperture when still maintaining a proper exposure. That means you can freeze motion, maintain your depth of field, or shoot handheld in low light. Now you might be thinking, wildlife photography, that makes sense, but not for landscape. Well, here's an example of a landscape image where I was photographing trains in the Canadian Rockies during the first snowfall. If the train wasn't there, I probably could increase the long exposure of the landscape and captured it beautifully at a low ISO. But because the train was moving through the scene, I needed a faster shutter speed to keep it sharp. That meant raising the ISO. Now the cool thing about this shot is that I love the noise in it. It kind of gives this film look. Now I took another photograph where my ISO is really low, so I had to slow down my shutter speed. And you can see the train is just one big cool blur and everything else is tack sharp. There's very little to no noise in this image, and when you compare the two, of course I'm going to pick the one with the train nice and sharp than this one. Sometimes a little bit of grain can actually enhance the atmosphere. Now let's talk about wildlife and ISO, because high ISO and wildlife tend to go together because we want to shoot in early mornings or evenings when wildlife is active, when you're not getting heat haze and you're not getting all of these other issues during the hot, bright part of the afternoon. Animals move quickly. Light conditions can change consistently, and many of the best moments happen early in the morning and late in the evening. Now, for example, I photographed ducks recently in the snow and on a frozen pond. The light levels were low, and I needed to get fast enough shutter speeds to freeze the moment. That meant raising the ISO quite a bit. But the results were fantastic. The feather details were still crisp, the reflections on the ice looked beautiful, and the images held up extremely well. Now, some of my most favorite wildlife photos, and even award-winning ones, were shot at high ISO settings. Headshots are one thing. We demand detail when we get really close to wildlife. Like, I want to see all the little droplets, the feather details. Everything needs to really stand out, be super crisp and clear. So when the ISO gets to a certain level, I end up backing up. I want to get environmental shots. I want to see behavior. And that's where I might change my photography style in the field. I might focus on something that's different than getting tight detail shots. If I have the light, if I'm using flash photography for, say, macro or bugs or something, well, that's different. I can control the light and thus control my ISO. But when it gets really dark, like in the evening, if I'm photographing owls, well then I might slowly back up or swap my lens for an environmental or behavioral shot. This will get you shots where you're not really pixel peeping on the fine details of a headshot, but more of the whole environment that you can enjoy. Now, if you need me to help you with some of these details in the field, I have a workshop that you can join and we can meet face to face. I partner with another incredible photographer and YouTuber, Adam Gibbs, and we're going to be taking a small group of photographers through the Canadian Rockies. We only have 8 spots available, and we'll be picking you up in Calgary and spending several days with you driving through the Canadian Rockies, exploring and photographing incredible landscapes that Canada has to offer. If you're interested in joining us, head over to mattshannon.ca/workshops. I'll also have a link down in the description where you can find all the information and reserve your spots. Now, if you do end up shooting at high ISO, there are a few things that will help you get the best results. First, avoid heavy cropping. Cropping magnifies noise and reduces the overall image quality. So getting the composition right in camera makes a huge difference. Second is to use a quality noise reduction software. Third, avoid underexposing your images in the field just to keep your ISO low, but then have to increase it in post-processing. Brightening your images in post-processing often creates way more noise than simply raising your ISO in the first place. Getting your exposure right in the field is always the better approach. Now, this is where one of my favorite camera settings comes in, and I've mentioned it many times on my channel, and that's manual mode with auto ISO. For wildlife photography, this is incredibly powerful, and I have a whole other episode on it that you can see right here. So basically, I set my shutter speed to freeze the action, and I set my aperture to get the depth of field that I want. Then I allowed the camera to automatically adjust the ISO to maintain the correct exposure. Now, this setting allows me to react really quickly without missing the moment. Now, another thing to note is that ISO in cameras have been getting better and better over the years. Now, a modern camera now, in comparison to a camera 15 years ago, can compete on the same ISO level. Now, some modern cameras have dual gain sensors, or what most people call a dual native ISO. The Nikon Z9 has this dual gain sensor, and it switches amplification to optimize noise performance. I believe for the Z9 it's around like 500. Really cool feature, and the technology is getting better and better. Now, if you're interested in seeing adventure videos where I'm in the field getting sharp images that have a high ISO, check out my other videos on this channel because there's a lot more for me to share. Thank you so much for watching. If you aren't subscribed, think about subscribing, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Ciao.